I'm going to share a few things I learned while installing a Centerstand on an older 2012 Honda NC700X with 33,000 miles on it, which I bought used recently. The first mistake was not looking on YouTube. I thought because it came with instructions it should be pretty easy. I ran into three main problems. The first was locating the screw hole that the springs hook onto on the right side. The second problem was the hole on the left side near the chain was rusted, and that messed up the threads on the bolt pretty badly. Even though I put grease on the bolt and even put a different bolt in and put grease on that to try to run it through and break in the threads. The final and most difficult problem was stretching the spring to get it in the hole. I didn't know that there was a simple technique where you either use some wire or string and you put that around the springs. Then you take your ratcheting tie-down strap and run it around the rear axle, and then you just pull on it using the ratchet mechanism to stretch out the spring. The strings are plenty strong. Even if they're ordinary string, you just loop it through several times. The directions say all you need to do is put the motorcycle on the kickstand. You don't have to use this swing arm stand. But since I had it, I thought I would use it. Okay, so you can see what the directions show, but what I found is I couldn't get the little spring nut started, so not too hard. I just took these hex bolts off, and that allowed me to kind of move this whole thing out slightly. I stuffed a rag in here, and that gave me a little extra room down here, and you can see my finger. So what I did to get it started is I took this and lifted it up into here, and then I put my finger on the round part and pushed it in the hole. Then I took the open end wrench, a 12mm wrench like this, and with my finger holding it, I was able to turn it slowly like that, pushing it in, and then get it started. I recommend putting a little grease on the threads. As you get towards more difficult, make sure to use the box end, which there is room to slip it in here like that. Make sure it's on properly as you tighten the thing up. Make sure that the it's clean in here. If it's not, take a nail or something and pick out any dirt so that the hex thing goes in there all the way. And I also recommend putting maybe tiny bit of grease on these to make sure they go in cleanly. As stuff gets older, the threads get damaged more easily, if things are rusty. Okay, next thing, I had a problem. You're going to want to do a dry run with this, and if there's any difficulty, I would recommend putting grease on it. I greased mine, and then I started to run it into the hole, and it had trouble. Started going okay, then as it went in a little more, it did not look like it was cross-threaded as far as I could see. I then ran this bolt, which is the same size. You can see what it did to the threads, and I greased it quite a bit. So keep in mind, something's wrong. Either the thread pitch or the hole is a little smaller than this. Something wasn't right. Hopefully you won't have that problem. So then the next step is you're going to take this and set it up in there. Then you're going to take this pin, and don't forget to grease the two parts that are going to rub. You don't need to do the middle if you don't want to. And then you're going to just put this through the hole. When you get to the other end, you're going to have to play with this to get it to line up. And the next thing is we'll put this screw in. Now here's what you don't want to do. You don't need to tie the ratchet strap back to the car the way I did. You want to attach it to the back axle. If you don't have a ratchet strap and you do have an assistant, or in either case, you want to just do
several loops of string around the springs, and you can also do them both at the same time. Around the string you can then slip at the back end a screwdriver or even your ratchet, and with two hands and maybe using your feet you'll be able to stretch the spring, and with an assistant you can easily get it into place.
Okay, we're done. The only thing we're going to have to do is just put the bolts on, these optional ones which I took off the 2 hex bolts, the nut and bolt for the muffler, which when you take them off it's good to keep them together like that. I also wire brush the threads to clean them up a little, and we'll put this bolt back in down here.
So, lessons learned. Always check YouTube first for ideas. Well, this came with instructions. It didn't talk about stretching out the springs, and that's the most difficult part. Also, on an older bike, you can run into some rust issues the way I did, and you're going to need to add some grease or oil where you don't on a newer bike that's been garaged.